Parents who have disowned their children. Why? Not a parent, but have all but disowned my father. He's a paranoid schizophrenic and was diagnosed about 12 years ago, and he routinely decides to stop taking his medications. On top of that, he's an incredibly lazy and selfish person with little self-control and a willingness to blame his problems on anything but himself and his own actions. During one of his frequent bouts of the disorder with no medication, about 5 years ago, he created a plan to save his loved ones, as Satan was coming to corrupt the world. He was going to mass murder essentially every family member he had in a 40-mile radius. About 30 people all counted. My cousin and his fiancée would be first by virtue of proximity, renting a room from him, and my girlfriend and I were going to be second, thanks to my being his firstborn son, and it would have proceeded from there. Luckily, my cousin is a stone cold badass, and sidestepped his shotgun as he fired, and proceeded to beat the crap out of him. Naturally, this created a bit of a rift, but I tried to keep things together with him, even through to couple of times he stopped taking his meds again. That was until I was living with him over this past summer after a particularly bad breakup. He lied about being taken off his meds to all of the family, so he could go without them. After hearing that, I spent 3 months busting butts to get myself extracted from that situation as fast as possible, sleeping with a knife under a pillow and a machete against my dresser in arm's reach. I went 5 days without sleep out of complete fear for my life. Finally, I got my crap sorted and was out of there by the end of August. 2 weeks later, he disappeared. 2 weeks after that, they found his truck, abandoned. A week after that, he was found in a field next to some old lady's yard, screaming at the sky about finding the devil and killing him. TLDR. My dad's a selfish prick who stops his meds because he doesn't like taking them and putting lives in danger by doing so, including his immediate family. He can get fricked. I haven't really said anything about this, but what the heck? My family doesn't know that I know why they disowned me. Well, not entirely disown, but pretty close. When I was born, I was supposed to be adopted. I get told different stories. On the abortion side, I had been told I was actually an attempted medically induced abortion gone wrong. Anyway, fast forward a few years. I was a quiet girl, never cried or really even laughed. However, I'd scream in my sleep, blood-curdling, heart-wrenching screams. Because of my family's religious background, I was labeled a witch or a demon, depending on which side of the family you talk to. I had to undergo an exorcism. I had overheard my aunt referring to me as the witch and got the story from my mom and grandmother. My family, all my dad's side, refused to really speak to me except for my siblings. The irony is I would grow up to practice nature spiritualism and witchcraft. My father disowned me when I was 11 because I took my mom's side in their divorce, like I had any idea what was going on. I have 2 younger brothers by him and he would take them on family vacations and leave me behind and such. I estranged myself from my mom as soon as I could move out for college because she has several screws loose and had effectively disowned me while living in the same home. One time when I was about 16, I got really sick and could barely breathe in the middle of the night, so I drove myself to the ER. I was in excruciating pain, but because I wasn't 18, the ER couldn't treat me without parental consent. No dad, so had to be mom. Instead of rushing to the hospital, she went back to sleep. When she did get up, she went to the gym for lap swimming, and eventually got to the ER maybe 8 hours later. After the divorce, my mom had custody of me and my 2 younger brothers, and we were really impoverished. Half the time our water was shut off. We lived in squalor, and she declared bankruptcy twice. In the midst of our dire situation, she decided to spend several $1,000s, I don't know from where, to have herself artificially inseminated to have another kid. My theory is that she was basically giving up on me and wanted to start over with a new kid that also wasn't anyone but hers, not from my father. How bad of a kid was I? I was depressed. I wonder why. From the time of their divorce until I moved out of my mom's house, I've never done drugs, never smoked, never committed a crime. I started college at 16. Helped me get away, always on the dean's list, volunteered every week at a local church. One of my punishments in high school was not being allowed to go to church, volunteered in the Middle East for 2 years, earned a master's degree from Harvard, and I'm currently an adjunct professor, so I'm an all-around degenerate and underachiever. I'm back in contact with both of my parents now, but I recognize I will never have a parent-son relationship with either of them. I'm primarily in contact with my mom so I can help protect my littlest brother from her since he still lives with her, the one that came from her self-artificial insemination. He actually just broke his tailbone the other day and she doesn't have health insurance for him. And she said he doesn't need an x-ray even though he can barely walk. I don't know what I can do really. So, yeah, I'll cry at their funerals but only because it will remind me that I never had real parents. Actual parent here. I once threw my then 13-year-old stepson out of the house, minus his brand new trainers, for calling his mum a C. I ran off after him but he had disappeared. 10 hours later, his dad phoned to say he had arrived safely at his apartment in Edinburgh, Scotland. The kid had hitchhiked 300 miles, barefoot. He returned home after spending 6 months with his dad, during which he shoplifted and truanted from school. Years later, I disowned him after a string of robberies and assaults were linked to him. He got his girl pregnant so he joined the army but they split up when he went to prison for going AWOL too many times. His mother died 2 years later and our relationship went into a steep decline ending in his permanent banishment from our home. He burgled the house repeatedly, threatened his brothers and assaulted his father until he finally ended up in prison for beating up his ex's new boyfriend. No matter what he did, his brothers stood by him which made it almost impossible for me to maintain any control over the situation. In desperation, I started to spend more and more time away, assuming that the less I was around, the sooner the situation would return to normal. It didn't. We hadn't spoken in years when I spotted him walking past a cafe I was in with his brothers. I'd just been paid and had given each of them a wad of cash and I wanted to give him his share, no matter what our differences. Before I had a chance to give him his envelope, he turned and stalked away. That was the last I saw of him until recently when we became friends on Facebook. He's in his late 20s now and, while he'll always have a bit of a Viking temperament, he seems to have calmed down enough to invite to my wedding. TL. DR. Temper tantrum teen banished and imprisoned after terrorizing family, home and community. I disowned my son and kicked him out of the house. He was 8 or 9 at the time and was mad all day and being a jerk to everyone. Finally he yelled at my wife and said he wished he wasn't part of our family. So I said fine and kicked him out. I gave him time to pack one suitcase. He went and lived in a tent in the corner of the garden. He got a bit cold because he didn't pack a sweater. Later he got hungry so I followed him to the store where he bought some food with his own money. He was thirsty and I let him fill up his water bottle he got out of the recycling, but I charged him 10 cents. About bedtime he was sad and lonely and cold, so he came in and apologized and said he wanted to be in our family again. Not a parent but was disowned myself when I was 15. I was caught with a knife that my girlfriend had taken and given back to me at school. I ended up getting caught because some other students saw me receive it and alerted a teacher. I ended up spending 3 months in juvenile hall and when I got out my parents had all of my things packed up in a storage locker. I ended up living with a couple 22-year-olds I knew. Nice thing was the students petitioned to let me back in so I came back the next year and actually graduated on time. Haven't seen my folks since then and I'm 24 now. My son, if he is still alive out there in the cold, told me he liked Phantom Menace better than Empire Strikes Back. Disowned male here. My father disowned me after deciding he loved H more than me. I wish he would have figured this out before he held a sickle to my throat planning on killing me. 3 times. I was 4.5. My mother is currently disowning me. My brother and I were apparently her world. Now that she found my new stepdad, a guy who came to stay with us for 2 weeks, she has decided to not only marry him, but force my brother and I to move halfway across the US to live with him. She also now wishes I was never born, and hates me. I hope my father enjoys his 60-year sentence, and my mom enjoys me never speaking to her again once she kicks me out. Not like she hasn't kicked me out many times before. To those of you who have been disowned by or who have disowned your parents, many of you have said I wish I still had a mom/dad. If you haven't, take a good look around at your friends. One of them has a mom or dad who knows about you, is hurting for you, and wants to be that parent you miss. I know this because I am mom 2.0, the improved version as one of them calls me. to 3 of my son's friends. It's not a big deal, it just means that I'll listen to them, scold them at times, give hugs, invite them to dinner, and give them a place to spend the holidays. I get as much happiness from them as they get from me. I know there's someone in your world who can fill a little piece of what you're missing. I know it's not the same, but we are here. Just look for us. My dad didn't live with my mom, and I yelled at him once for never being there for me and he disowned me. I'm pretty sure I swore at him a lot. I don't remember. I was 14 and was pissed off because he wouldn't send money so we wouldn't be homeless. Again, it was child support. I shouldn't have had to beg for child support. Ugh. Haven't seen him since, and I looked up my family tree online once and it said he died 3 years ago. I don't know if this is the wrong guy or no one told me my dad died. Either way it's screwed up. I got disowned, and I'm better for it. I was 14 when my mom handed me my birth certificate and social security card and told me to get the frick out, and she hasn't talked to me since. I'm 33 now. For many years I yearned to have my mother back, but just recently, in the last couple of years I finally realized I'm better without her, and probably wouldn't be where I am in life with her. Why did I get the boot? I was a problem child, likely lack of parenting. They said they didn't want me to be a bad influence on my half siblings. I think they just didn't want to deal with me. Frick 'em. I am the most successful of all of my siblings, by a country mile. I still can't fathom how a parent disowns a child, but at least I stopped trying. I don't need to understand her fricked up head. That's her problem. My father hasn't talked to me in more than 5 years. He has given me no explanation or reason. It is destroying me. I don't know what to do. Maybe he Reddits and I'll get an explanation in this post. Who am I kidding? I'll never know why. Conversely, I've disowned my father. I'm sorry friend that your dad is doing this to you, but honestly, some fathers just aren't worth having. Everyone else who has answered this question has taken it jokingly. I have a real answer. I had to give up a child because I had no way to take care of her. Her birth father has 110% custody. I didn't have a pot to pee in or a window to throw it out of. I was 20 and her father was 29. He was an engineer and made more money than me, had his own home and was a very loving person. Long story short, he was better equipped as a parent than I was. I signed over my rights. Not cause I was a bad mom, but a good one. I knew he could take care of her better and he has done an awesome job. She's healthy, caring, sweet, and kind. Who could ask for anything more? I had to disown my kid. He would basically tear our house apart. He'd chew through furniture, break plates and cutlery, and he'd even headbutt me. The final straw, though, was when he started chewing our grass on the front lawn in full view of the neighbors. He left me with no choice. I'll never keep a goat as a pet again. Could have milked it for a bit longer though. My stepdad disowned his own 2 daughters a couple years back because of some BS with his ex-wife. She cheated on him and then kicked him out of the house when the girls were little. She refused visitation, so they could not see him. He married my mom probably a decade after, something that the ex-wife didn't like. Years later, when they're in their late 20s and early 30s, he's able to actually see and talk to them on a semi-regular basis. But the ex-wife starts lying to both of them, saying my stepdad was seeking out his older daughter's exes and telling them things. One ex sent a FB message to my mom, but my mom never volunteered information. They believed her because they're completely brainwashed, and so they turned on him on a dime. When all he's ever done is try to be a good father, he called it quits on trying anymore, and then decided to leave to them $1 to share in his will. I mean, it's not like my siblings and I are going to get very much because of his financial standing, but we're going to get more than 50 cents apiece, which is his point. Apparently, they can't contest the will, saying he's crazy and forgot about us. But also, it shows just how much they're worth to him after they showed their true loyalty. Not a parent, but I've disowned my father. He used to beat my mom, my siblings and I. He was selfish and would take his money and go partying while my mom had to struggle to provide for us. He went to jail for a few years and life was calming down, but when he got out it all started over again. He eventually left my mom, taking everything she had, and he married a younger woman. I tried forgiving him and having a relationship with him a few years ago, but all he does is lie, steal and hurt those who care for him. I'm working on forgiving him, but I don't want him in my life anymore. Me. My brother and sister were disowned by my mother. She ran off with her boyfriend whom she kept a secret from the rest of the family. I thought her to be a good mother because she bought me cool stuff like games, new clothes, a $150 boomerang I only used once, and a freaking $200 binoculars I only used to look out my window. And she would always take us out to eat at nice restaurants. I understand why she left, because all of us were spoiled brats who would always whine for new crap but never show her gratitude, and whenever we didn't have our way, we would treat her like crap. I vividly remember walking into the bathroom in the early morning needing to take a pee and I saw her passed out on the floor next to half-done laundry. So there you have a disowned kid's perspective on why his mother abandoned her children. Hard work, no appreciation, and a desire to live without children. If you disowned your child because of their sexual preference, religious beliefs, or lack of religious beliefs, you never deserved to be a parent in the first place. I'll be honest, as a person who hides a lot from her family to avoid being disowned, and has still been practically disowned, any parent who would truly disown their child except for really exceptional reasons does not really love their child. Divorce. Many people in my family can be freaking staunch. Most of the disowning has been temporary but can go on for like 5 or 10 years. Some of it has been over divorce and remarrying, divorce in general and who got married. My grandparents disowning my dad over divorces and marrying women my dad's mother hates with a passion. Divorce was a huge disgrace for my grandparents. Many things are to them though, drugs, alcoholism included, complete laziness or leeching off of society, etc. They have disowned their children temporarily, but for large chunks. For some of these things, where I'm from, the most disowning in general comes from drugs and the things that follow. My parents disowned my sister because she is gay. The saddest part is that they believe they're doing the right thing because they're Christian, and they believe she belongs in heck. WTF mom and dad. I love my sister Alpha more. I can't imagine my own parents rejecting me for who I am. I'm kind of the reverse here. I disowned my father. Basically, the old man was abusive as heck to my mother. He was never physically abusive to her, but there were very few nights when he was around that didn't end with my mother in tears when they were still married. The man would fly into a rage about seemingly random things. Everything from me leaving my toys out to my mother glancing in the general direction of another male human whenever they went out. Also, the old man had a case of sibling rivalry that treated the entire rest of the world as an extended family. If some guy got a nice car, he had to get a better one. If someone got promoted at his job, he'd get promoted or else he'd quit. Heck, he'd even get angry at her for paying more attention to me than him when I was an infant. We had to move constantly when I was really young because he'd keep wearing out his welcome at different jobs and wind up rendering himself unhireable in any given town. Though when I turned 5 my mother refused to move again and we stayed in our home in Kentucky while he moved to Florida. He'd come back sometimes and I often found myself wishing he didn't. My father was never really physically abusive to either of us. He wouldn't hit me except on rare occasions, though when he did it wasn't exactly a love tap either. The man was ex-Navy and built like a gorilla. One time he hit me below the belt when I was 12 and I almost wound up vomiting on the spot from pain. That was when my parents had their ground zero fight, and after my father had left in a rage, my mother filed for divorce and changed the locks on the house. After that I gave him a second chance when I was 13. I wanted to see if divorce had changed him and if he'd learned anything. One time, during visitation, he told me, "I don't know why your mother divorced me. I gave her 30 wonderful years." Yet, when I was 15 I essentially disowned him. I sent him an email saying that I didn't want to visit anymore, broke off all contact with him, and I haven't heard from him in 12 years now. I'm 27. I did the opposite. I disowned my father. My parents divorced before I could remember, so when I was a kid, 4 or 5 years old, I got visitation with my dad. We did all kinds of stupid crap. We shot fireworks at each other, shot guns, not at each other, and he had us box with his neighborhood kids. He was a sloppy drunk and passed out on his couch each night, leaving us to fend for ourselves. During the last visitation we asked him for his lighter to burn down a fort we made which almost caught a whole tree on fire. So he was pee when we woke him from his stupor, and after the fire was contained he proceeded to beat the living heck out of my older brother while I hid in a closet. That was the last visitation I remember. I didn't hear anything from him for 7 years straight. No phone calls, letters, postcards, or emails. My brother had to contact him during his rebellious teen years. For a time he threatened my mom with leaving and living with our dad. After contact was made I was forced to visit our grandparents on our dad's side, which wasn't so bad. My step-grandfather was a cool guy but grandma was mean. They surprise us with this family dinner where my dad shows up with his new wife telling us how great his life is now. He's putting away about 100k a year in his own business, yada yada yada. No mention of an I'm sorry for being a crappy dad and beating the heck out of you. That never set right with me. Anyway, my brother kept contact for years, hitting up my father for various things. New laptops for school mostly, or for paying rent. There's a price though, and that's hearing my dad tear down any self-esteem you have. I never asked anything from the old man, but every now and then I'd have to endure that balls. Finally I sent him one email telling him I don't need his help for anything. He was a crappy dad in person and I want nothing to do with him. I blocked him from all online contact and he's never actually called me before, but I have his number saved so I can't avoid it. It's been a happy almost year now that I haven't heard from him. Sadly my brother has to draw from that well still time to time, and I hear bits and pieces. This is from my social psychology professor back in college. She had 4 kids, but the 4th she adopted. When her youngest son was in grade school, he had a best friend who would come over every day after school, do homework, and even eat dinner with them. This kid barely ever went home. One day she calls the parents and starts to inquire to his family life. Well-to-do family, had food, shelter and nearly everything. The parents though didn't want to, be parents anymore. No offense to the kid. They wanted to travel the world, go on cruises, live an expensive life together without him tagging along. So they came to an agreement. My teacher would adopt said kid and his biological parents would put money into an account for him every month. And it worked. They traveled and paid money to have someone raise their kid, and the kid was included into a now loving family. I disowned my parents, albeit as an adult. My mother has severe bipolar disorder and refuses to take medication. Her highs are super high and her lows caused her to beat me and my siblings savagely, burn us with hot irons, etc. My father also had a bad temper and was complacent in the physical and psychological abuse perpetrated on us by my mom. I won't list the psychological stuff. It's more painful than the physical abuse and tough to talk about. When I became an adult, not dwelling on the past, I continued to talk to them. Then my mother began calling my wife a bee and making up things my wife, said while gossiping with other family members, effectively turning my side of the family against my sweet, kind wife. Truth is my mother was jealous of my wife's relationship with me and was trying to sabotage it. So I asked her to stop and my dad told me I need to divorce that freaking C while my mom screamed in the background. It was a phone call. So I stopped talking to them for a few years. We tried again maybe 2 years ago and discussed how things would have to be. Mutual respect, no making things up. If you have a problem address it with us directly, etc. This lasted 2 weeks before it all started again and I began to be told to divorce my wife again. So I cut off contact again, this time forever, and told them why. For months they called me saying, how can you do this to us? Your mother is getting dangerously depressed over this, basically threatening suicide, and generally trying to make me feel guilty. Sad part is I have 2 kids they never see, nor don't acknowledge. My siblings still talk to my parents and they refer to my nieces and nephews as their only grandkids. It's tough not having parents now, but I feel it's healthier. This was posted late, so it's buried, but it felt good to get it off my chest. Basically, it was tough to cut contact with my parents, but it was for the best. My cousin used to tell me a story about his best friend, who for anonymity's sake we'll call Tom. They attended high school together in Uppsala, Sweden, when Tom was 15. His father moved them to Alabama to live with his new wife and stepdaughter. Unfortunately for Tom, his new stepsister was both A, smoking hot, and B, desperate and a little bit crazy. After living with them for about 3 months, the stepsister, Lily, confesses she is in love with Tom. Tom eventually decides he's in love with her too, so they start hooking up when their parents aren't around. Eventually, Lily's mother catches them in the shower together, and she and Tom's father tell the kids they have to stop or they'll kick them both out. Tom is okay with this for the time being, but Lily goes a bit insane and tries to kill her mother, then runs away. Tom goes after her, and when they return their parents effectively disown them, and literally march them out the front door and lock it. With only a suitcase each and about $500, they slowly make their way north to where I live, where Tom reunites with my cousin, who flies them back to Sweden. They still live together in the town Tom grew up in, and are trying to get legally married. It sounds a bit fricked up, but when I met them 2 years ago, I swear to God I've never met two people more in love than Tom and his sister. TL. DR. Swedish dude moves to redneck country. Frick's stepsister gets kicked out, migrates north, goes to Sweden to get married. Posted my story to RF just a few weeks ago. Basically, my dad disowned my sister for marrying a guy that he didn't approve of. He said it was because of religious differences, but I'm fairly certain it's because he just didn't like him or my sister. I wasn't allowed to talk to her for about 6 months, and he hasn't spoken to her in about a year and a half, although I see her regularly. My dad's kind of an butthole. I'm one of those people that got disowned after telling my parents I was gay. I was 22 and I was told never to contact them again, and we didn't talk at all for over 2 years. Out of the blue one day I asked to come by and we acted like nothing ever happened. Now we email or call about once a month but still never talk about the 2 years in my life where they disowned me. My sister disowned me and all of my family after one of our family members passed away unexpectedly. 0 forms of contact from my sister. I know she doesn't use Reddit, but I kinda wished she did so I knew what I could do to fix it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.